Anyway, that's pretty much it. Let me show you a few slides that give you a little idea of what's happened over the last few years. I'm going to put a slide here on our property values. This is the tax roll for the last 20 years, 18 years. Anyway, as you can see, from 1990 to 2000, there was maybe a 50% growth over that 10 years. But in the next 10 years, from 2000 to 2008, it's more than doubled. That's significant growth. And that's significant revenue growth for all of the entities that receive property tax revenue. The sad part is that most of them have spent it all rather than saving for this rainy day of the downturn. And I don't know how long you guys have been in business, but I've seen 3 downturns since my tenure involved with real estate, which goes back to when I was in my 20s. It's not something that's going to always go up, but yet when we have good revenue growth, it seems like the legislature and local governments tend to spend it rather than save enough for these downturns. This is the growth. I kind of showed you this a little bit earlier, and when we were talking about the mid-90s, how low the growth was. But if you look, this is almost since Prop 13 was passed. It was passed effective 1978. From 1980 on through to now, if you take an average of all that growth, you're probably in the 8% range. That's not bad growth for revenue for local government and schools and whatnot. Like I said, the problem is they spend at these levels rather than spending at this level, and that way if they spent at this level and saved all that, then they'd be able to fill this in. We'd have a pretty even course, unfortunately. And I'm hoping maybe we see some reform over the next couple of years in our state finances and local government, so that maybe we will even these trends out. But it's inevitable we're going to be up and down with real estate. There's no doubt about it.
Do you do this presentation to the boards so that they understand?
I do talk to the board. Yeah, I do talk to the board.
Do they understand?
I don't do this presentation, but I meet with each board member annually.
But do you encourage them to stay at a...
Well, I do. I try to. I mean, I let them know what the revenue projection is, and I tell them they shouldn't be spending it all because this is abnormal growth. I mean, these 2 years, when we had 15% growth, I said, this is abnormal. Don't count on this. Don't count on that growth. Yeah. This is by jurisdiction, and what it shows is how much growth last year occurred. Like I said, last year we had a little less than 2% countywide, even though this says 2%, it actually was a little less than 2%, but we rounded off to 2%. Citrus Heights was about 2% growth. Elk Grove -2. They're going to have a much bigger negative this year. Folsom at 4%, Galt -2, Isleton 5% growth, Rancho Sugar at 1%, City at 4% growth, and that's mostly because of what's happening downtown and the major buildings that have been coming into play, and then the unincorporated are at 2%. Like I said, this bottom number is going to be about 5 to 7% this year, negative, not positive.
Can we go back to your thoughts on the growth thing? And you say an average of 8% is the revenue from
property taxes.
From property taxes.
Right.
There are other things that enter into
right,
what
sales
they
tax.
have to spend.
No, sales tax. Right, sales tax. So they're a big. I mean, property tax for one government is probably about half, a little under half of their budget. The other half is with sales tax and other monies they get. Right.
But you only base your 8% on.
Mine is just strictly the property tax. Right.
But you can tell what percentage of that their
yeah.
total budget that they're spending.
Well, here's the diagram. I mean, they get county is 18% of every property tax dollar. So when I say there's going to be, let's see, $140 billion in tax value, 1% of that's the pure property tax, so there's gonna be $1.4 billion being given to local government, to all these entities. And then when you take their 18% of that, that's what they're gonna end up with. So yeah, I mean, I go over that with them. Schools, and this is a piece of legislation that our statewide association is going to be putting before the legislature this year. In 1993, schools who get 45% of the revenue from property tax, they were exempted. In 1993, the legislature exempted them from paying their fair share of property tax administration. So that made the counties have to make up the difference, because we are paid through the general fund of the county and reimbursed by all of the entities except for schools. So our administration costs, mine, the assessor, the tax collector, and the auditor, is about 2%. So about 2 cents of every dollar is the cost of administering the program. And since schools don't pay their fair share, the county tries to make up the difference. When it was passed in '93, we immediately were cutting in the number of staff that we had. So when Roger was assessor, we never could complete the roll on time. And in fact, we got worse and worse and worse through the 90s. Until 1996 or 7, the state said, okay, we will, because they backfill the schools under, if you remember, Prop 98, says that they have to backfill the schools to a certain level. That the state started giving us kind of a loan program. They loaned us or granted us a certain amount of money. And they did that up until about 3 years ago. And then they said, no, we don't have the funds anymore. We're not going to help you out. So we have a bill in this year to basically reestablish that every entity that pays or that receives property tax dollars pays their fair share. And so we're asking that the schools, once again, pay their fair share. It's only right that if someone gets revenue from a source, they should pay for the cost of getting that revenue. And so, so that's a bill we're going to have before the legislature here this year. How many of you have you heard of split roll, the term split roll? Okay, that, yeah, I'm sure Janelle has. That is Janelle, was it Janelle?
Yes.
There's been emphasis, as you know, to change Prop 13. It never goes anywhere, but there's been thoughts of doing that because they're looking for revenue sources. And this is a way to create more revenue. And what they're thinking about doing, what the split roll is, to split the residential and leave it under pure Prop 13 and everything that's been passed since, but assess commercial property annually at its market value. So that would change that whole scenario for commercial properties. We're opposed to it as an association. And one thing that may take us out of opposition, only because it's now not an administrative nightmare for us. If they were to make my staff have to value every commercial piece of property in this town annually, I would have to hire probably 40 or 50 commercial appraisers to be able to do that. I only have about 20 commercial appraisers right now, so I have to triple my staff to even be able to accomplish something like that, and it would take me a number of years to do it. The other thing is, the other way of getting around this is to change the rate. You know, the rate is 1%. If they change it on commercial properties to 2%, then commercial owners would be paying double what residential owners are. That comes up every year or two. It'll probably come up during this 2-year session, and so it'll be something to be aware of, because they are looking for ways to increase revenue.